Welcome to Chromatic Counsel, the podcast where we dive into the journey of attorneys, their successes, challenges, and of course, their go-to colors. I am your host, Carrie Heaps, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. I've got an exciting show lined up for you. And if you are interested in being a guest on the show, there's a link in the show notes below. Just click on it. You can fill out the application to be considered as a guest. We love to have attorneys. Anyone who works within the legal realm is welcome to apply to be considered. So today we have an amazing show, and I have as my guest today Robert Scavone Jr. He is a senior counsel at Freeman Mathis Gary, LLP. He's a member of the appellate advocacy practice section and focuses his practice on appeals and trial support. And prior to joining that firm, he did gain appellate experience at a boutique firm in Florida and tried numerous cases to verdict as an assistant state attorney in Palm Beach County. And he's taught Florida constitutional law and professional responsibility at Florida International University College of Law. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited.
I know, I'm very excited to have you here. I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite some time, and I'm just glad we were able to finally coordinate a time for you to be here. But I would love for you to share with the listening audience just a little bit more, about your professional journey and what inspired you to go into law.
Sure. I think the big inspiration was a desire to get into public service. I went to law school because I wanted to be a federal prosecutor. And I've tried at various times in my career to do that and have not made the cut. But I was fortunate enough to be a prosecutor in Palm Beach County, Florida for over 4 years. And it was a tremendous experience. Just amazing people that I worked with. I miss them very much. The work was very fulfilling and rewarding, which I think is, should be at the top of your list when you're trying to figure out what you want to do for a living. And I believed in the mission. I believed in advocating for the victims. I mean, the victims aren't our clients when we're prosecutors, but we're advocating on their behalf. And too often in the criminal justice system, the victims get left behind. And, so a desire to be in public service was, I think, at the forefront. And also the thought of it being a challenge. I knew going in that going to law school and being a lawyer would be a challenging experience. And I like challenges. So, I think for those reasons, it made sense for me.
Mm-hmm. And I always like to ask everyone that because I find everybody has just, a different journey or a different reason of why they chose law. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people, I think right now, who just passed the bar, and
Okay.
there's new attorneys coming out, new attorneys that have just graduated. If you were to get in front of them personally and just have an audience with them for a few minutes, what are two key pieces of advice that you would give to them starting out on this journey?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, that the bar pass rates came out today. My alma mater, FIU, was number 3, so very proud of them. I think the first would be about the actual practice of law, and that would be that I think all lawyers, especially new lawyers, should begin to get very familiar with how to use AI effectively and ethically. AI is here. It's not going anywhere. It will become a larger and larger piece of what we do as lawyers. And if you're not learning how to use AI effectively and creatively, you're going to be left behind. So that would be my first bit of advice is to start diving into AI and how it can help you. And then the second piece of that would be to practice mindfulness, whatever that looks like for you. The legal profession is very challenging, very stressful at times. A lot of people that are in the practice of law are naturally competitive, and those attributes end up in creating what can be a very stressful job. So practicing some sort of mindfulness, whether that be meditation or um, even exercise, very important. Those things are ways to help you manage your stress. And without that, I think the long run for you doesn't look very good.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that. I was, when you were talking about mindfulness in the beginning, just saying about meditation, which I try to do every morning. And I also journal. I'm a big fan. Like
Yeah,
that kind of helps me stay
yeah,
grounded. But I want to piggyback a question here about AI, because I do agree with you. I think every industry is getting hit. I think law is no exception. But, do you still feel like AI has a long way to go with that? Like that's not going to happen right away? And the reason I ask is that, like, for example, last night I probably asked my AI chat GPT, because I have two different ones. And I was trying to get it to help me create like a little image, like an image I could put on my site with verbiage. And I must have gone back and forth like 8 times, and everything from misspelled words to, I finally just said, it's okay, I'll just do it myself, because it was literally an hour. And I thought, this is crazy. I could have done it by now. So, I
yeah.
mean, I'm just curious, do you feel like that's going to be more impactful now, or is in the future?
You mean the application of AI into the practice of law?
Yes.
So just real quickly on your problem that you had, AI for some reason, or at least ChatGPT, is very bad about creating images. They create nice images, but if you include words in those images, invariably they get it wrong. And it doesn't matter how many times you try to correct them, it just doesn't come out right.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I've been reading a lot about AI in the practice of law, and anytime I can find a podcast on someone who is an expert about AI and where it's going, I listen.
Mhm.
And from my perspective, it already has become a pretty big part of the law, but we've sort of just scratched the surface.
Mhm.
Um, the things that it can do right now are pretty amazing. I'll give you a couple examples. I will at times put an opponent's legal argument or even an appellate court's legal argument into an AI platform and ask it to analyze it for logical flaws or analytical flaws. And it does a really good job of pointing out different fallacies in the arguments. And so that's really helpful. It's also extremely helpful at creating uh, summaries of very dense material. So if you want to summarize a case, or if you want to summarize, if you've got a legal argument in a brief and you want to summarize it in a paragraph or two, it's very good at that. Um, and you can literally, some of these AI platforms, you can put somebody's summary judgment motion in there and upload the pleadings and upload the relevant documents like affidavits or depositions and ask it to write you a response. And in a matter of minutes, it will produce a pretty good first draft. That's important, the first draft. Lawyers are responsible for the work that they submit to courts, and you should never take anything from ChatGPT as gospel and just sign it. And we've had a number of courts that have come out with opinions that have sanctioned attorneys for doing those sort of things. So it's still your obligation to cite, check the cases, read the cases, make sure that what that first draft says is right. But again, these are just, we're scratching the surface at what it will be able to do in the future. And that's why I say it's just imperative that lawyers start to get up to speed on this. Too many firms are running scared from AI
Mhm.
because of all the ethical issues behind it.
Yeah.
And I think what they need to start doing is understand those ethical concerns and obviously teach their lawyers about them. But I think they need to start embracing the fact that it's here and it's going to start eating away at what we do as lawyers.
Yeah. And I think too, even the people who are listening, that are general public pro se litigants, are probably going to be using it as a big tool too, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But like what you had said, don't take it as gospel. You still need to check all the facts and everything. Now, you primarily your appeals. So what is one aspect of the appeals process that you feel like the general public and even newer attorneys need to understand better about the process?
So I would say it's one issue that to me is at the forefront, and then there are some sub issues that relate to that. The main issue is making sure that you do a cost benefit analysis for the clients and for trial counsel. A lot of times, trial lawyers and clients will understandably come into a case or an appeal very invested in what has happened. Um, they've spent a lot of years, a lot of money, and they feel like they were wronged and that the court got it wrong. So it's understandable that they come in with that emotional investment. But as an appellate lawyer, you need to step back and look at cases objectively and deal with your client and trial counsel from an objective point of view. There are no principles when it comes to the trials and appeals. It's not about, well, he did me wrong and this is not about the money, it's about the principle. No, it's about the law and the facts. And you've got to step back and do a cost benefit analysis and say, do I have issues here that are not just error, but that are reversible error, that are actually going to get me a reversal. And you need to step back even further and say, okay, if I get the reversal, where does that put me? If I get a reversal, am I going back to the trial court to have a whole new trial again, which is going to cost me much more money and years of my life again? What's at stake? Is it worth what's at stake to do all that sort of stuff? So I think the cost benefit analysis is a big picture of it. And, part and parcel to that is, and sometimes I think lawyers and certainly the general public misunderstand this or don't fully grasp what it means. The standard of review is really important. If you're going up on appeal on an abuse of discretion standard, your odds of success are really, really slim. So yeah, they may seem like error, and yeah, maybe theoretically a court could reverse on those grounds, but it's so unlikely. Look, I would love the business, right? I'd love to make the money. But for me, what's most important in dealing with clients and trial lawyers is trying to be objective and explain to them that, look, I'd love your case, but you're very unlikely to win. And here's what's going to happen if you don't win.
Yeah. And you obviously too, you've had a podcast, which is I've listened to it several times. You had some amazing guests on your show. What insights would you offer to any attorneys who want to have their own podcast? Because I come across them too. They're like, oh wow, I'd love to do that, but I don't have the time. And so like somebody who's wanting to kind of launch their own podcast for their firm to bring in more business or whatever they're trying to do, what would you advise them?
Sure. The podcast was called Summarily, and I did it for 3 years. Had just a great time. Like you said, had some really wonderful guests, talked about really interesting developments in the law, including AI and things like that. But I stopped it a few months back just because I wanted to focus on other aspects of my professional life, and I wanted to focus more on my personal life. So a friend of mine who was a co-host of mine then, her name's Joni Mosley, she took over the podcast and renamed it Zone of Risk. She's doing it on a different format and, a different style, and it's great. And, but you can still find all the Summarily episodes under that banner, under her banner of Zone of Risk. But, starting a podcast, I think the first thing you need to realize is that if it's going to be a good podcast, it's going to take up a lot of your time. As you know, doing a podcast is not simply just sitting down and having a conversation with somebody. It can be in some other, aspects of life. It can just be sort of banter about, current events, and that's all fun. But if you want to do a legal podcast and you really want to have substantive discussions, you've got to read cases, you've got to read briefs, you've got to read things that your guests have done, and it takes a tremendous amount of time. So first and foremost, make sure that you have the time to do it. And that's going to depend on how many episodes you want to do a month and how long you want the episodes to be, so on and so forth. But overall, the advice I would give anyone that wants to start a podcast is be interesting, be timely, be relevant, and be entertaining, right? If you can't accomplish those things, then your likelihood of success are probably not great.
And I would second that wholeheartedly. And you're right. It takes a lot of time, and it's not just producing it. It's you got to market it as far as getting the word out there. You got to get guests. I think one of my favorite guests that you had on, I think it was Dr. Melissa, was it Pigot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jury
And
selection.
I actually referenced that particular podcast in when it was accredited, one of my CLEs. I would talk about that and I would tell people go listen,
Yeah,
to this
she's great.
particular episode. Yeah. Because I think she was talking a lot too. I think focusing more on like jury selection, if I remember correctly. And she was talking about some of the focus groups and
Yeah.
she got into clothing and she got into
Oh
color. And
yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this. So
Yeah. It
um,
matters.
yeah, and that was one of my favorite. I mean, you had a lot of great guests, but that was one of my favorite. Now you recently became you became certified as a personal trainer.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know kind of what motivated you to do that, and how has it influenced your professional or personal life as well?
Sure. I mean, I've been weight training, lifting weights for almost 40 years, right? It's been a part of my life on and off for 4 decades, almost
Mhm.
4 decades. I love the gym. When I go there, I leave the world behind. I am just there focused on me and my workout and my music and everything else. All the stress goes away, all the thoughts about work go away. So for me, the gym is, a prior. It was one of the priorities in my life. And I also really like helping people.
Mhm.
So I thought, hey, personal trainer kind of checks both of those boxes. I can help people learn how to work out. So I decided to do it and got certified in it. Um, I don't know that it's really influenced my professional. I don't think being a personal trainer has influenced my professional or private life, but I certainly think that weight training has, right? It's made me more fit, more healthy, less stressed, more productive. And I think it's some sort of exercise is something that everybody should be doing, at least 3 days a week,
Yeah.
whether it's, swimming or biking or walking or, weight training, dancing, whatever you enjoy doing that's active, try to do it, for 30 minutes, 3 times a week. And that's sort of a good starting point. It's a very low barrier to entry
Mhm.
and you can build from there. But if you can start with those, with that foundation, it can change your life.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And law is so stressful. For most people who don't know my background too, because I worked for attorneys many years ago before I started my own business. I worked as a legal assistant, and I remember the gentleman when I first started where it was a husband and wife team that I worked for. He did business law, she did family law. And I remember when they first set up their office, because I was one of their first employees, I remember they had an insurance guy who came in and just set up our health plan, and I overheard them in the conference room, and it was like I remember my boss at the time said, well, what about, I think they were talking about disability insurance, and he said, well, what about if I get to a point where law is just too stressful for me and I can't practice anymore? And I'm in the other room and I'm thinking to myself, of course, I don't know anything really about law. And I'm like, stressful? This guy sits behind a desk all day. What are you talking about? Well, 6 months later,
Yeah.
after I got my experience just dealing with clients and the emotional side, I mentally was apologizing to him without having to come out and say, because I'm like, I get what he's talking about now, because it's just so stressful. Um, but in your opinion, what changes do you think are needed in the industry, in the legal industry, when it comes to mental health and overall well-being? I mean, I see too, like just even CLE providing, I see so many things on the Florida Bar's website about stress management and wellness and mental health CLE. And like, what are your thoughts
Sure.
on all of that?
Well, first I would say that um, it has to be a personal commitment,
Mhm.
right? The individual has to take responsibility for their mental health and well-being. If they don't, then it doesn't matter what the industry does to try to promote that. You have to, as an individual, understand that, just like physical fitness is important to your health, mental mental health is important to your life overall. So you have to make that commitment. I know that most studies estimate that lawyers have thoughts of suicide double the rate of what the general population does. There was a 2023 NIH study that concluded that 28% of lawyers experience depression. I think it was 19% report anxiety, and like 21% report, drug problems or alcohol abuse problems. And, those are things that the industry can help in some ways, like you said, CLEs. They can, the Florida bar does a pretty good job with mental health and promoting that. So the industry can continue to spotlight mental health and wellness and how important it is. Bar associations, Broward Bar, Miami-Dade Bar, whatever, can do courses on the importance of mental health and how to combat perfectionism and imposter syndrome and overcommitment to your job and all these things that lead to the very bad outcomes. But I think, if you really want to move the needle on this issue and get serious about it, the industry as a whole, like if you're talking about like bar associations and stuff like that, I think they're kind of the third leg of a three-legged stool. The first leg is the the person and their commitment. And then the second leg of the stool is the firms. Firms need to have a bigger role and a genuine role in helping people with mental health and helping with their employees with mental health. And that includes paralegals and legal assistants and administrative folks. They need to, it can't just be a statement on a website about how well-being is important and work-life balance is important. It has to be an actual practice. So, de-emphasizing the billable hour, promoting well-being with real policies rather than just statements, offering counseling to their employees. And little things like, they're not little, but like they're things that I think are important. Stop guilting lawyers about taking time off. And when a lawyer goes on vacation, don't email them about, well, are you doing this? Let them disconnect, right? Let them have that disconnection. I think if firms can learn how to do these things, they'll have much happier lawyers. They'll have lawyers who are more mentally well. And those people are more likely to stay with the firms that are supporting them in those ways. When firms don't support their employees, that's one of the biggest triggers. That and finances are the biggest triggers for like, I'm out of here. I don't feel like the firm really supports me. I went on vacation and, every night I was getting emails about stuff that had to be done. And, how come you're not working on this even though you're on vacation? That's no way to treat employees.
Yeah, I would agree. It's almost like an issue of boundaries for the attorney and for the firm. Like you said, they're on vacation. And I don't know if it was you or if it was someone else on LinkedIn, but I remember reading a post where somebody was talking about CLE. And I wholeheartedly agreed with this because I'm like, this would be an amazing idea. And they were saying, I wish that instead of doing like certain like mental health credits, like let me submit my gym membership that I'm working out with a personal trainer, that I'm taking care of my physical well-being, and let me get credit for that. And I think that would be was that you or maybe it was someone else?
No, but I do vaguely remember, it might have been me, because I remember something about, I think the Florida bar recently changed some aspect of the CLE program. I really can't remember.
Yeah,
Um,
but I thought it was
but,
a great idea,
yeah, those things would certainly help, or, having um, just offering, more programming for it. And not only programming for individual lawyers, but programming for firms. Like have business psychologists come in and talk about the importance of having happy employees, and teach the firms how they can be more effective at promoting mental health and well-being.
Yeah, I think that that would be a great change to see coming. Now, obviously, because the show is called Chromatic Counsel, I always like to ask my favorite question. If there's any particular colors or wardrobe, like a suit that you like to wear if you're going to court that you feel more confident in. I know you seem to be a big fan of bow ties, which I
Yes,
love. So,
yes.
do you have any particular colors that you're like, oh wow, every time I wear this color, things go really well?
Yeah, that's a funny question. I don't really have any. I think color is an individual choice.
Mhm.
What looks good on you, what do you feel comfortable in? If you're going to wear clothes just for the sake of wearing colors and you don't feel comfortable, you feel like you're not being yourself, then you shouldn't do it. I don't know that I have any particular colors. I'm a nonconformist when it comes to sartorial choices. Like you said, I wear bow ties, I wear funny socks, I wear bright colors. I don't restrict myself to just black shoes. But I always dress professionally. I think that's the first question is this outfit professional?
Mhm.
And what's professional is going to depend on what you're doing and where you are.
Right.
A firm may say that business casual is professional, but no judge is going to allow that in their courtroom. So
Right.
you have to know your audience and be yourself and figure out what looks good on you. And don't be afraid to bend the rules a little bit.
Mhm.
If that's your personality. Like I said, I think like with anything in life, it's important to be yourself. So I don't necessarily have any colors. I think for male attorneys, it's important, obviously, to have a couple of dark suits in your collection. You got to have a couple of white shirts, even though white may not be your thing, because sometimes the setting commands it. Um, I think all men should own a tuxedo. I think we
Mhm.
should put tuxedo rentals out of business because, like, you just buy a good one, you'll spend, I don't know, you could spend anywhere from three to who knows what on a tuxedo, but you've got it in your collection. If you ever got to go to a big event, you have it there. You don't have to worry about the fitting and all that stuff. So, that kind of stuff I think are sort of mandatory for your collection. But other than that, it's just all personal choices.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, is there anything upcoming for you that you'd like to share with everyone?
No, not really. As you mentioned, I'm just getting started now at Freeman Mathis and Gary in the appellate advocacy group. Um, really, really enjoying the work. Really interesting work, complex work. The people here have been fantastic. The firm really seems committed to happy employees. I talked to a lot of people before I came, and I heard that mantra, and I was like, yeah, they all say that. But so far, it's lived up to the expectations I had. So other than just focusing on, doing the best I can here
Mhm.
and trying to be as mentally well as I can. Like you mentioned, journaling, gratitudes, before you go to bed, meditation, whatever it is, whatever, really feels comfortable to you and it's something that you can really stick with. That's the important thing, right?
Mhm.
Meditation's fantastic, but if you can't do it on a regular basis because of whatever, it's hard for you. I suggest you give it a try,
Mhm.
because sometimes it takes a little bit of time before you get what it's all about. But, that is sort of my big priorities right now is, you know, number one is my relationship with my wife. Number two is being well, health, mentally and physically. And then number three is just doing the best I can here at Freeman Mathis.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Robert. I love the conversation. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, I have links in the show notes below. You can get in touch with Robert for appellate purposes or even for personal training. And I want to thank everyone for tuning into the show. If what Robert shared with you resonates with you, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you share the episode with other attorneys who may benefit as well. And that is a wrap for this episode. And I can't wait to see you all on our next episode of Chromatic Counsel.